Hey there, magical experimenters, and welcome back to another video from me. So I thought I would do kind of a part three to the wealth magic series that I've been doing here for a little bit. I took a break last week to focus on attention, and all and the other stuff, but I thought I'd come back to it this week, and all that part of this kind of came about because last week within the last week or so, a member of the Magical Experiments Facebook group said, talked about how he wanted to do money magic to get like a sum of money, and he said, I appreciate Taylor's approach, but there's got to be, like I kind of need this now, and I get it. I totally do, and I respect that. And I've done money magic for that purpose. I mean, I don't do it so much now. I'm going to talk a bit about that in a few moments here. But I've done it in the past, and I've done things like where I've asked wealth deities for help, or I've done like a sigil thing. In fact, that was basically how I got my first, well, not my first car, but my first car in my 20s, like back in my like mid 20s. I was a graduate student, and I I was getting my doctorate degree, but I didn't have a car. I had not had a car for a few years, and it really sucked. And you're walking to the grocery store a half hour each way, lugging groceries. It's not a fun thing, and I needed a couple $1,000s at the time. And so what I ended up doing was I used my comic book sigil method to create sigils to basically help me get money and get the car. And really, what it came right down to is that basically then, my dad contacted me out of the blue and said, hey, do you really need my help right now? And I was like, yeah, I do, and explained what it was, and he consequently, helped me buy a car. Well, basically bought the car for me, and that made a huge difference because suddenly I had a car and I could drive places, and I didn't have to spend, you know, I didn't have to walk a half hour either way in the snow, and I could go to festivals and conventions, which back at the time I was doing. So I have done money magic for that purpose of getting getting like a sum of money. So why don't I do it now so much? What's the difference now, you might wonder? And the difference really is that my approach to money magic is shifted by virtue of the fact that I don't have a pressing need to have a large amount of money just right now show up in my life. If anything, my approach has been more of the gradual acquisition of wealth and the application of it toward things that matter in my life. So it's in this case, it's that focus on getting more sales leads, or getting that promotion in a job, or advancing the career of someone else, or helping or driving, or helping to bring more awareness of my books so that people want to buy stuff, like things like that. And that's been kind of the focus, this and kind of this life design around money, as opposed to just I need a large sum of money right now. But I don't think there's anything wrong with getting the large sum of money on occasion when you need it. I mean, I do think you want to think it through and be careful with parameters. I mean, obviously. And I liked one person's response. She's like, well, I just asked my deity, Lakshmi, to help me out. And every time I need money, there you go. I think that's a pretty smart approach. But lately I've been reading this book called Sacred Economics by Charles Eisenstein, and I highly recommend it. I have a link in the post for the video. And the reason I recommend it is because it's really kind of given me it's really been giving me some thought-provoking considerations about money and the evolution of money. Now, this author isn't going in there and saying money's bad, right? He does explore some of the negative aspects of money and how the economic decisions made around money impact our world and impact our communities and things like that. And I think it's worth reading for that reason alone, just because you get a better understanding. But he also discusses a lot of the positive aspects of money. And one of the things that I find fascinating is how he explores, concepts such as local currency and community sharing, and things along those lines. I don't necessarily agree with all of his conclusions, but I see the value of what he's talking about, and having participated in some of these things to some degree or another, I can say that there's something there to this book. And it's gotten me to think further about something I've discussed in Manifesting Wealth, which is the idea that money likes to move. So I treat money as a spiritual entity in and of itself, and the one thing that always stands out to me about money is that it really likes to move. It likes to be doing something, whether that movement is spending money on something that you want to acquire, or whether it's accruing interest, or something else along those lines. Money likes to move. And when I think about that, I think that that perhaps one of the ways to work with money, and like you say, getting a sum of money, is to actually factor in that concept of movement. So you think of, okay, if I need the sum of money, what do I really need it for? So if I need a few $1,000s, what is that money going to really go toward? Because I'm assuming that, like, when somebody has a very specific sum in mind, they actually want to do something with that money. It's not like they just want to store it away somewhere. And granted, I mean, if you save it, you're still doing something with it. There's some kind of movement on it. But when I think about this idea of somebody needing a sum of money, it gets me thinking about, like, well, what's the ultimate purpose of that money for? Why am I really using that money? And think back to the example I used. I needed money for a car. Ultimately, really, what did I need? I needed a car. And so it wasn't even so much about the money. It was about getting the money so that I could, so that the necessary movement could occur, that I could transition that money toward buying a car. And I think that, like, if you consider that, like, what is it that I really need this money for? What's the end goal, the ultimate desire? That in and of itself can be a very potent way to apply wealth magic toward things that you want to achieve. And it can be something that actually helps you to manifest money when you need it now, kind of thing, like where you're really looking at your results, and you're wanting to achieve something specific. I need this sum of money in order to change this aspect of my life, or I need this in order to help me do this. Well, okay, so what is it we really need there? What is it we're trying to accomplish? We're trying to accomplish X, Y, and Z, and we want this amount, and there we go. So it's worthwhile considering, what am I going to move that money toward? How am I going to draw upon this concept of movement and use it perhaps to attract money to me? Because then, also it's kind of like you're sending out this great beacon to money, saying, I need to do something with you, so therefore I need you, and I need you to show up in my life fast, and I need to have a way for you to show up in my life fast. These are the kinds of things that I like to think about when it comes to movement and money, and how money magic can work, because then you really draw on the necessary elements that can help you. And using some of my own recent examples of wealth magic, I've drawn upon the principles of gravity and magnetism. Well, again, similar to the idea, really similarly based around this concept, like with money, that the money likes to move, but also that, like, in order to achieve wealth, you want a gravitational pull. You want a kind of a magnetism in place. And then what do you want to do with that ultimately? You want to use it to increase. And in my case, I want to use it to increase my wealth, so that I can consequently achieve an independent lifestyle ultimately. Now some would say, well, why not just attract the amount of money you need to achieve that independent lifestyle? And the answer to that is, well, that is actually what I'm doing. It's just that I'm not naming a specific sum in mind, because I could say, well, I need X amount of money, and that might help me get there, but it's not going to necessarily be the end all be all of everything. It's really more about the idea in my mind right now. For my approach, it's really about the idea of amplifying and enhancing the wealth generation and the concept of compound interest, and really kind of enhancing that and focusing it in such a way that it actually makes things, you know, come together smoothly in the overall direction of my life and where and how I want to design my life. So these are the things that I think about sometimes when it comes to money and movement and money magic and and really this concept of the evolution of money. It's really the evolution of money, I think, is partially involved around, like, you know, how we think about money and how we work with it. So, you know, I don't think it's a bad thing to say, you know, look, I need this sum of money in order to achieve X. That's fine. But then there's also that evolution of, well, what do I ultimately want to use all this money for? And then there's that evolution I talk about, like with the, or that's talked about in sacred economics, where it's like, well, what could we actually do with, you know, what could we do to transition our society in a different way, that where we have a healthier relationship with money, and as a result also a healthier relationship with our environment and our communities and things along those lines. I mean, all of these things are important things to consider, and they're things that certainly play a role in my own thought process and why I do some of the activities I do. It's one of the reasons why, for example, I focus at least some of my, you know, some of my resources toward, you know, whether it's time or money, toward doing some type of charity work for reasons that really comes right down to, how do I want to impact the overall the community as well, you know, the world that I live in, things like that. So I think, you know, these are all things to really think about and consider and explore, and I wanted to put that out there. So this is probably going to be the last video for a little while now on this particular thing, but it's been a fun little series to create, and hopefully you guys have enjoyed it, and I'll see you next week.